Former President Trump is teasing an announcement. He could soon announce his bid to return to the White House. At a rally in Ohio, he told supporters he'd be making a big announcement next Tuesday.
I'm going to be making a very big announcement on Tuesday, November 15th at Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida.
Former president also said he didn't want his announcement to distract from the midterm elections.
CBS News Chief Washington Correspondent Major Garrett is here with us now in Studio 57. Good to see you.
Great to be here.
Let's start with Trump's announcement. If he does run, what do you think the reaction from Republican voters will be?
So our colleague Bob Costa said this morning, and I agree with it. It's based on reporting he's done that I've done. Many Republicans will look at this if former President Trump announces on the 15th next week, not as a sign of strength, but as a sign of weakness. If you're the strong, presumptive nominee, you wait as long as you can. You husband all of your resources, and you force anyone not named you, who you think might run against you, to jump in and see if they can raise money, exhaust their resources, argue with one another, and leave you out of it. But by declaring so early he's trying to freeze the field, that suggests to many Republicans, both in and outside the Trump circle, that he wants to try to keep people out.
Who's he trying to box out in particular?
Ron DeSantis, for sure. But also Mike Pompeo, Mike Pence, Nikki Haley, just to name three. Possibly
former
Kristi
members of
Noem.
his administration.
Former members of his administration, possibly Kristi Noem, possibly Ted Cruz. Tom Cotton has already said that he's not going to run. He was someone that was sort of looking at it. Marco Rubio, Rick Scott. Lots of Republicans are looking at the possibility of running in what they would regard as a very favorable net environment in 2024, but for the Trump factor against President Biden. So, by jumping in early, the signal from the former president is, I need to lock this up, lock it up now if I can, and discourage those, because he hopes anyone who jumps in after that will be forced to answer this question. Why are you attacking the former president? And for the base primary voters in the Republican Party, that's a pretty big thing to deal with.
So,
and one other thing I'd like to say, I really want to compliment our colleague Chris Van Cleve for two things he just did. Yes, I know it's a bit laborious, but he explained that in Arizona and every other jurisdiction in this country, there are redundancies. If there are problems in precincts, there are redundancies to address them. That doesn't mean the system is not working or it's broken. It means the system is actually functioning. And there's a sequence to how votes come in sometimes. And that sequence matters, not just to how the actual result is formed, but what expectations are. And if you understand the sequence, you can therefore more readily understand what your expectations ought to be or ought not to be. And I really think you did a great job doing that.
In your book, The Big Truth, written with David Becker, the former DOJ official and CBS News contributor, you point that out, that this is a weaponized tactic to question a methodical vote count as a suspect vote count. You expect that to happen again?
So it's going to be interesting. One of the things that I remember from 2020 is in some states, former President Trump, while he was still president of the United States, said, stop counting the votes. In other states, he said, keep counting the votes. Guess what election administrators do? They count all the votes. They count all the votes. And here's another irony in this whole conversation. Many on the Trump side deride the mainstream media. They think we're phony and fake and full of agenda and bias. Election administrators don't call elections. They certify elections days and days and days after the election has occurred. Who calls them? The media. So when we call it for a Republican, are we suddenly biased or no longer biased? No. They rely on us because they rely on data that they themselves have. We're going to say this over and over again tonight, Anthony Salvanto and I, on the data desk. What we're looking at is no different than what the experts in the Republican and the Democratic parties or the candidates involved are looking at. They're sifting the same metrics, the same data, and they're coming to the same rough conclusions about where the vote's coming in, where it's coming out. So if Republicans, the one thing to watch tonight and possibly early tomorrow is, are they preemptively declaring victory before anyone is called or anyone is certified? That would get into the way of actually knowing who won based on the actual count and certification of the vote.
It takes time. Everyone just has to be patient. These results aren't going to come in immediately at 9 p.m. I want to switch gears. CBS News has found there are 308 Republican candidates that have raised doubts about the validity or integrity of the 2020 election. What will it mean if those candidates are successful tonight?
It's going to mean they're going to have to say, what is it about the system that's so much better now that you've won that was flawed when someone you liked lost. And in many places, the system will be almost exactly the same as 2020. Some states have modestly changed their election accessibility laws. Some of them made it more easy to vote, some have made it slightly harder to vote. But the actual vote counting process across the country is almost the same as it was in 2020. So wait a minute, it's great now and believable now, but it was flawed then? I think that begins to create an aura of hypocrisy about what this issue is all about. And what it has really become for base Republicans is a kind of proof of your validity of Trump's support. If you're a true believing Trump supporter, you deny the 2020 election or raise sufficient questions about it to prove your sort of fealty and devotion to the former president. It's a good housekeeping seal. It's really not about the underlying facts, because the underlying facts are never going to change. The 2020 election was lost by Donald Trump, won by Joe Biden, and by the way, won by lots of Republicans down ballot for House, Senate, and state legislative races.
And the safest, most secure in American history.
Safest and most secure, and not only that, most scrutinized and verified. No election in our history has had to undergo more scrutiny in more jurisdictions by more courts asking more questions about the deeper underlying process of casting and counting ballots in history. And it stood up to that scrutiny because it was real.
Major Garrett, thank you very much.
Thanks.